Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Hey, welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. This is episode 121, and we're recording this on May 1st of 2024. And the reason I bring that date up is because we have a guest back on that we did our first episode May 29th of 2023, and it did so well, I called him a few weeks ago and I said, Jason, you got to come back on. And thankfully he took time out of his busy schedule and came on to record again. I have a feeling this won't be our last time together. So folks, we have Jason Grom on. Jason is the Vice President of National Sales Organization Development and Field Training at Ameriprise Financial. And I know all of you have heard that name, Ameriprise Financial, many times. But Jason is much more than that. And a lot of things have happened to Jason, some really good things since last year. But I wanted to bring Jason on because, like I said, May 29th of 2023, we recorded an episode called Unlocking Our True Selves. And that show went pretty viral. And the last time I checked, I know it had been listened to on 4 continents. Antarctica wasn't one of the ones that he didn't hit the Antarctica one yet. But the neat thing is, out of 120 shows I recorded, that show is number 6 in all-time downloads. Really well received. We got a lot of heart letters on that. And so I thought, got to bring him back on. So my friend Jason, welcome back to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Brian, thank you so much for having me back on again. And it is great to hear how people responded to that first episode. I've heard a lot from people who listened to that episode. And of course, my grandma, it was dedicated to her. So that was certainly special to her. And she might have listened to it a few times, which might have bumped up the numbers a little bit. But I've also had just people that maybe I didn't even know that well indicate how they've applied something that I talked about there. In particular, there's this woman I've known for a few decades now, but I don't know her that well. She lived at a place where we would go on vacation in the summers and lived in Florida in the winters. And I had sent her an email just to check in and say hello to her. And she indicated that she has a little note by her nightstand that reminds her to think about what made her happy and what did she learn that day. And it's something that she goes to bed every single night asking her that same question that I asked my kids. So I'm so excited to hear those types of examples where people applied something that was brought up in that episode.
No, that's great to hear. So I know some things that have changed in your life since we last spoke, but can you give us an update? How have things been going for you since all of the end of 23 and now into 24, personally and professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start personally. Learning and happiness, as I mentioned, still continue to be a part of our focus, something I ask my kids every night. They are very, very busy with piano and track and swimming and golf and all sorts of activities. So that keeps my wife Heather and I very busy. We also went on this awesome Disney trip recently where we went fishing. We caught bass at Disney, which I didn't even know beforehand that was something that was possible. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and our son has food allergies, as I mentioned on the last episode, and they do things right at Disney as it relates to food allergies. The other thing on a personal standpoint is as our kids are getting a little bit older, my wife and I are actually enjoying the fact that we can actually spend some time together. We went on a couples trip to Asheville, North Carolina with her cousins, just had an amazing time, and just rediscovering some of the things that we haven't been able to enjoy because our kids were a little bit younger, and still enjoying, of course, the time we have with our kids. I'm still involved with Help at Your Door, which is a nonprofit in the Twin Cities. We had our spring gala. I had to go on the NBC local news here and give a little speech there to promote that activity. So that's been going well. And then professionally, as you mentioned, Brian, my role, it's similar to what I was doing last year, but I've now added back in the training focus. So coaching our coaches that help our advisors grow their business and serve their clients, and the training that goes into that, which is technology training, as well as the skills that they need to be successful in delivering the client experience that we focus on here at Ameriprise. But the big reason that we're talking and we reconnected is I published a book. And that's something that maybe it was way back in my mind when we talked, but really wasn't something that I thought that was going to be happening when we're talking here today.
Let's talk about that. Because, folks, I want to share with you his book, and I'd like you to explore getting on Amazon or your choice of source and looking for his book. And Jason can bring up the title for you in a minute here, but I can tell you 5-star rating across the board and a plethora of amazing testimonials for the book are on here. So, Jason, go ahead. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and this really fits into learning, and that mantra of learning in the flow of life is still something that I focus on. And I learned how to publish and promote a book, which I did not have that skill set before. As you think about the process, which I know before I actually went into this process, I thought that somebody just opened up a notebook or a typewriter and just sat down and started typing or writing. Well, I first started thinking about this when I've been getting some encouragement from colleagues and friends that see this weekly blog that I write, Learn in the Flow of Life, and they said, you should write a book about that. And I know a couple authors. I know Steve Rosenbaum, who wrote a couple books on learning pathways, and Mary Connolly Sullivan that was on your podcast as well. And so I was inspired by them a bit, but I had this epiphany moment in November. And I was thinking about my grandpa, and he's who I spotlighted. He and Mike Leckrone were two people I spotlighted on the last podcast. And I was thinking about him, and I was thinking about his World War II diaries. The diaries are something that he wrote for his parents about 80 years ago at this point. He wrote pretty much every single day his experiences through the different places that he traveled as part of his service. About 20, 25 years ago, my Uncle Steve, my mom Barb, and I took those diaries and these little booklets that are about the size of a cell phone and transposed them into an electronic format. And then my mom put them into a binder, and we shared with family and friends. And even one of my uncles used it in his World War II class that he taught in high school. My mom always said that it could be a book, but none of us knew, how do you actually publish a book? How would you actually go about this? So that November when I had the epiphany, I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. So I got to work. I started taking the document in the version that we had previously and typing away to reformat it, look at the size of the book. I got some advice from Steve Rosenbaum, and I was making some progress, spending time Saturday and Sunday mornings at like 5 a.m., but I only got about halfway there, and I was starting to feel a little stressed out, like, would I ever be able to finish this? So I reached out to a former colleague, Ameriprise once again, Kim Rogers, and said, hey, I really like your design thinking and how you approach working on the things we partnered on, which was training. Could this be applied for this book? And she looked at the details that I shared, and she said, I'm interested. Let's chat. So we had a call, and we did some brainstorming. She asked me some great questions about my goals and what I was trying to accomplish and what the current reality looked like. And then she started doing some research. She was looking at nonfiction books. How should you write those? What are the sections of those? And I still did meet with a couple publishers because Mary Connolly Sullivan, and I mentioned that has been on this podcast, she had worked with a few, and I explored that a bit more. But then Kim and I just went to work, and we said, let's figure this out. So I wrote intros and a preface and a conclusion, collected tributes from a lot of family members, because my grandfather was just this warm person that everyone that was in his sphere just looked at him in a positive manner. And then Kim and I went back and forth. She would work on editing, and we'd have a punch list, hundreds of items that we had to go through. And we finally said, we can do this on our own. We don't need a publisher at this point. So I got what's called an ISBN number and a Library of Congress number, and went to Amazon, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, uploaded the documents. We got this proof copy sent to us in the mail that I actually have a copy of right here in front of me. that we then read through every single page and found hundreds of more items that we needed to update. And once we made those updates, updated that to Kindle Direct Publishing, and I waited. And it seemed like the longest, I think, 48 hours of my entire life. But when it became live, it was a reality. And I called my grandma and said, it's live. The book is available and you are going to get the first copy. And she was so excited and I was so excited. And since then, I've been spending every waking hour outside of work and family and everything else promoting the book and really wanting to get his story out there to the public.
So, everyone, the title of the book is A Soldier's Song, the World War II Diary of Sergeant Jack Anderson. And it just became available March 31st of this year. So we will include a direct link on the bottom of the show notes today. Please click on the bottom, explore this book. And I didn't get to buy it yet because we were supposed to do this episode 3 weeks ago. And I had to cancel for some technical issues I was facing with my podcast equipment. But I'm going to order it. And I'm looking at the reviews, Jason. And the one thing that stands out as I'm clicking on these is amazing story. I had no idea as to the challenges, impact, and perspective going to war and fighting in a war, what it was really like. Very well written book, sharing life experiences of a great man. I highly recommend. Very unique firsthand account of a soldier in Europe during World War II. As I was reading this book, his words and manner of speaking from a different era transported me right into the scene. What an amazing book! To see how war was firsthand was so to see how war was firsthand was so neat. It was like, everything seems to be that what I'm getting from the review, a lot of them anyway, is it transports people back to that era for them to really get that firsthand account of what World War II was like. And what a way to do it! You didn't write this from the perspective of from a non-combatant soldier. This was your grandpa's. These were your grandpa's words, his direct experience, and you just gave these to the public with, of course, your work in your putting it all together into a packet. But I'm excited to read this because I have a feeling, knowing you and knowing what you've shared about your grandpa with me previously, there's a lot of life lessons in this book.
Absolutely, and when you think about that firsthand account, yes, I did add a preface which describes how I came to write this or publish this book, because so much of it is his writing. Introductions that give a little bit of context, a conclusion to share some of my takeaways from this, and then those tributes that speak to his character. It's still his firsthand account, and I actually have one of the pages earmarked right now. Would it be okay if I just read a quick excerpt from what he wrote?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So this is back to your point about the firsthand account. So this is from May 12th, Friday. Jerry was really throwing her artillery around here last night. 17s just went overhead towards Jerry territory. Boy, it sure was good to see them again. First time in 2 months. Washed clothes this morning. 2 fellows from each gun section went to fire the new bazookas this afternoon down by the beach. Major Cook and Captain Lawson went down a little ahead of them. There are a bunch of Jerry mines in there, but they were taped off. They walked around the top and all of a sudden heard a click. They both stopped and wondered what it was. In the 5 seconds, the mine went off and Major Cook caught the full force right in the stomach. He was killed instantly, and Captain Lawson, standing right next to him, got a little scratch. He was going to get his lieutenant colonel rating this month, too. 1 minute he was laughing and joking, and the next minute, dead.
Wow.
I got a little choked up there because that was the firsthand account of Major Cook.
Well, and you think about it, he speaks so matter of fact about it. There was no forced hyperbole. The drama was just exactly what was experienced by your grandfather and the other soldiers around him. Now I can see why one of the your reviewers put it's better than most World War II historical lessons we learn in school. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And Major Cook, I've made contact with some of his family members. I did find them in a World War II online group that I found where his great grandson was looking for information on him. And I said, that name sounds familiar. And when I found this entry from May 12th, that it was absolutely his great grandfather, Major Cook, that was killed. And I did share that, of course, with him so that he had that, at least my grandfather's firsthand account of what happened that day. But he obviously paid the ultimate sacrifice. And we know we have Memorial Day coming up soon, and that's where we certainly remember those that made that ultimate sacrifice. And my grandfather documented a number of those examples. Not all of it is somebody getting killed or injured. There are a lot of other components to just being in a war, and some downtime, some music, of course. The book is called A Soldier's Song, and thank you for bringing up the name. I had forgot to mention that, but the front cover is him playing a piano in a building in Toulon, France, and music was always a big part of his life from the time he was very young, and he was in choirs and played the piano, and ultimately after the war, he was in the army band. In the Korean War, he re-enlisted and joined the army band and was on active duty there as a drum major, and he sang barbershop, he sang at weddings, he sang at funerals, family sing-alongs. Music was always threaded throughout, including his time in World War II.
Wow. That must have been very surreal for his grandson to hear that from you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that he had done some research before we made the connection, but absolutely the fact that there was this other soldier this soldier that was in Major Cook's organization, one of the enlisted men my grandfather was a sergeant. He led a gun crew, but a major is leading a big group of people. And this is the perspective that my grandfather had of what happened that day, and some additional perspective that he didn't have before.
Wow. Well, I just put it in my cart, so I wanted to make sure I ordered it when we get off the phone here.
Yeah.
Well, so when you were going through the writing, because you've seen, obviously you guys had transpired these letters before, put them in digital format. Did you feel even more connection with your grandfather as you were going through this final time to put it in actual book format?
Absolutely. And when I went through this experience, as you've mentioned, we spent the time transposing his diary previously. My uncle started it, my mom jumped in, and then I jumped in and helped out, and my mom went through some of the finishing touches. A lot of what I felt like I was doing at that point in time was typing. I was just typing, taking what was in this document and typing it. And I did make some connection, and my grandfather was alive at this point, so obviously had that personal connection. Now that he's gone, as I was doing the work to format, and Kim did a ton of that as well, but then reading through in more detail and doing research on certain things that we couldn't figure out some of the details behind, I did feel this connection to him. And some of what I took away, I didn't even think about when I first went through it, and a new perspective that I had on my grandfather. And I always felt like he was a leader, and he had a good job at a leadership role at the paper company, and had a nice home, still has a nice home that my grandma still lives in that they built, and a family cottage, a nice cottage, but still something he put up by his own two hands. But he was a leader, and I heard that loud and clear. I saw that, I read that, and I felt his presence in how he operated. And he had many moments where he vented, where he didn't know what was happening in the big picture from a war standpoint, and Normandy was going to be happening. They kept up to speed using Stars and Stripes, so they had some newspapers and the like. But he had some moments where it's like, seriously, we're going to move our gun position again? I don't know why we keep moving over and over and over again. It's so much work for my guys. And he still did it. He vented in the diary, and then he did the best he could to lead his people, take care of his people, and ensure that they met the expectations of the leaders. And throughout, you see another inspection today. We heard that we're one of the best gun crews, if not the best gun crew in the entire Army, and things of that nature. So he did a really good job. He was a good leader. He had one excerpt, which I will share it. I know that this is one of the things that the people people come to, and they certainly have this reaction, but I won't read it, but I'll at least give you the context of it. There was one excerpt where you could tell that one of the leaders was a bit upset about some decisions that were made that could have put the equipment at risk. And I emphasize that, put the equipment at risk. The leader was upset because, in his view, he could replace the people, but he could not replace the equipment. Think how opposite that is from how every single human being thinks about our lives. Equipment can be replaced. Human life cannot be replaced. But because of fighting a war and looking at how there were probably supply chain issues and trying to figure out how they got equipment to the front lines, that was the focus of this individual. And very frustrating to hear that. And he was very frustrated with that. But also then you look at the context of war, and I still can't even fathom. 50 million people were killed during World War II, civilians and soldiers for that matter, in the Holocaust. It's just unbelievable, but a reality of what war is like.
It's hard for us to even fathom that. I mean, at all. Yeah. I can't wrap my head around that one bit. But then, like you said, it's context of war, and perhaps that equipment being damaged or not, or being lost, would have cost many more lives too. I mean, it's the long term not so obvious versus the short term and obvious, but still, our innate reaction as a human being is people over equipment every time.
Right. Well, yes, absolutely.
And one of the things I remember you saying to me last year on the show was your grandpa always made other people the center of attention. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably one of the things that made him such an incredible leader, in the military, absolutely, as well as outside as a civilian, because that is our job as a leader, I think, for anybody, is to increase the sense of self-worth of the people you're serving and who are around you. And that's exactly what your grandpa did, it sounds like. I want to know your grandma's reaction of the book.
Yeah. So when I first talked to her about wanting to do it, I wrote the preface, which really was the story of what caused me to want to turn this into a book. And she read it, and she immediately broke into tears, and she was very happy at that point in time. And I knew at that point, I have to make this happen. I have to make this happen because this would make her so happy. As I progressed through all the steps I just described, as from the point of that November to the point of publishing, every time I would talk to her, she would comment on, how far along are you on the book? And she was always very nice with me, but sometimes she can get a little bit more aggressive with my mom, and she demonstrated some level of worry. Like, is this going to ever be done? And keep in mind, from November to March 31st, it's really not that long of a time to take this and publish it into a book, but she was starting to get nervous, and I was feeling a bit of pressure, even though her health was fine, but she was worrying about this and wanting to make sure this got out there. And then I knew when I was very close that even when she demonstrated some level of worry, that I was soon going to be there. And I even had this pull at one point to give her a copy, the proof copy, which wasn't the final version. And Kim said, are you sure you want to give her this version that really isn't the final version? I said, well, how long is it going to take, do you think? And, well, Jason, you know that you're going to read the whole thing and go through your check marks that we need to update. And your mom said she's doing the same, and I'll have the same done. We're going to have this thing done in a couple of weeks. And we did. And when she received her book, which we had a little bit of issues that we had to work through, where she lives in Marinette, Wisconsin, which is not the closest to all the Amazon distribution centers. So hers was the first book that was ordered, but some people started getting their books early and were posting pictures on Facebook, which I'm so appreciative of, although my grandma didn't have her book yet. So I reached out to those individuals. Can you take that down? Can you take that down? She is on Facebook quite a bit. So they did, and the book showed up. I could tell on Amazon that it was in her mailbox. And I called my mom. My mom was helping with a funeral. She wasn't at the funeral, but setting up for it. And I said, the book is in her mailbox. Can you go over there right now? And she did. she brought it over to her, and I was able to FaceTime with her as she opened up the book and had it for the first time. And there were tears once again, and very, very happy. Very happy.
So, folks out there, Grandma will be 100 this October, to let you all know, and she's doing very well. And we did dedicate the last episode to her, so why the hell not do this episode for her too? Because she's going to be a centenarian here in a few months, and I know that she must be so proud of you. And what a treat to be able to see this actually out there in the public, so the world can see what your grandpa, what he did, and the kind of person he was. So, man, that's so powerful. That's so powerful.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to keep talking about the book,
you,
and you can continue on with as you answer the questions. But I'd like to ask, you talked last year, and again, it was so well received. What would you say, Jason, has been your greatest learning since we last talked?
Well, the learning for me is, as you think about the process of publishing a book, I've absolutely learned how to publish a book, and I know that not everybody's probably out there thinking, I want to publish a book. Maybe there's a very small number of people that are publishing a book, although I've realized, wow, there are a lot of books out there as I got my book out there. But my point in highlighting that for the audience is that this thing that maybe you never thought was possible, you actually can achieve it. And the learning for me is that I am achievement oriented and focused. Every single day starts at zero. And I've had some things that I've accomplished from a life, personal and professional standpoint, that I've had moments thinking, all right, well, that was it. That was the pinnacle at this point. And no, there's actually more to come. And when you apply the learning approach and learning in the flow of life, you have tremendous potential to keep learning and keep growing and keep accomplishing things. Of course, you got to tie it to what matters most to you, but that's absolutely in the realm of possibility.
Okay, you just said something that I want to go back to. Every day starts at zero.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So every day starts at zero from the standpoint of achievement or accomplishment. So I talked in the last episode about StrengthsFinder. An achiever is one of my top 5 themes or strengths. There are some downsides to it in that every day starts at zero. So when you're on vacation, you might end up being a little bit more active than others would prefer. And I do relax from time to time, but every day starts at zero from the standpoint of I am looking to accomplish things. And I know you have a routine from a morning standpoint and some of the things that you regularly do. When I wake up and I'm able to stretch and read from the Daily Stoic and read a Bible passage and exercise and read, I'm already accomplishing things immediately as I wake up, and it feels good to me. There's a book out there, Make Your Bed, that comes from a military officer. Same sort of concept. You're accomplishing something immediately, and it feels good to accomplish things. So I don't feel it's like zero from the standpoint of I have to start over. Instead, there's ability to accomplish something every day, a clean slate to accomplish something, and it feels good to accomplish things.
That's exactly when you said that, that's the first thing that resonated with me, because I think so often, I know I'm guilty of this. If I have a bad day prior, or even maybe a few days, I'm just not accomplishing, I'm slipping behind, I feel when I wake up quite often that I'm starting at a negative 12 or a negative 30. And that's very frustrating, can be very disheartening. And I love the idea of every day start at zero. Every day I start at zero. What that does right there, I think it can give a person hope. Like, I might have messed up the past 42 years of my life. Tomorrow, this morning when I wake up, I start at zero. I like that. It's very simple.
I need to follow that approach when I'm golfing more frequently, because that's where I run into some challenges with this next hole is an opportunity versus how terribly I hit it on the last one.
I wrote down, because I told you prior to when we were supposed to record a couple of weeks ago, I listened to our previous episode again, and the one thing I kept getting out of it was eat a rock.
Yeah.
Your old band coach or instructor said, I believe Mike. Yeah, University of Wisconsin.
Mike Leckrone. And what's so cool about it is you think about, we met May 29th of last year. I spotlighted my grandfather and I spotlighted Mike. And my grandfather's book came out on March 31st. Mike Leckrone book is coming out later this year in September. So both of them will have a book. My grandfather's a little bit different than Mike's, but nonetheless, they'll both have a book out there. And of course, I pre-ordered it because I absolutely want to have one and need to get an autographed copy as well soon.
Is that going to be on Amazon?
It will be. Yep, it'll be on Amazon.
Can you pre-order it now on Amazon?
You can, yes.
Can you give us the title of that book so I can put a link to that?
Yes, and I hope I don't mess it up, but it's Moments of Happiness, which is one of his mantras, which I know I spoke about a little bit on this podcast as well. But it's Moments of Happiness, and it's a University of Wisconsin band story, which he wrote with a journalist from Madison as well. So it looks like it's going to be a great book. Okay,
so everybody, as long as I can pull it off, we'll have a link to that so you can pre-order Mike's book on the show notes today, along with Jason's book. And so click on those, check them out. And when is Mike's book coming out? I'm trying to click it on here, but I'm not pulling it up fast enough while I'm talking.
It's coming out in September.
Okay.
September.
Okay, wonderful. Great. Good. So I like that. So you took this idea of the book, and like you said, not everybody wants to publish a book, but everybody can understand the concept of accomplishing something in a really relatively short period of time, friend. I mean, we talked a year ago, not even a year ago, 11 months ago.
Right.
And you published a book during that. I've been working on a book for 15 years. Maybe I need to start at zero tomorrow morning.
Or maybe call up Kim Rogers, since she was such a great help to get me to the finish line.
I'll have to get her number. And I really appreciate you introducing me to Mary. Mary and I did a fantastic show together. I cherish that woman. Her book was fantastic.
Yes.
I gave it to my mother. I gave it to several people who all loved it. Okay, so that was your biggest or greatest learning. What would you say in the last 11 months or so has been your greatest challenge? And what did you do to overcome that? Or what are you doing to overcome it?
Yeah, my greatest challenge is balancing everything. And I don't know if there's ever any true answer to how you effectively balance, but I have work, family, my health, the nonprofit where I serve on the board of directors, my friends, having fun, reading every day, the book. I'm overall managing and navigating well, although I have moments where I'm worried that I'm not giving enough attention to any one area. And at the beginning of this year, one of my colleagues here at Ameriprise recommended a word of the year. Like, pick a word that just reminds you and centers you and focuses you. And that word for me is present. So be present in the moment. I am absolutely present at the moment with you here right now. I do have moments, though, where I'm thinking about that next meeting that I might have or the next thing that I need to complete, and I need to be present. So that has absolutely helped me. Then I've also went back to some of my my models and frameworks that have helped me think about my work. So from a work standpoint, there are 4 roles to a great manager: select for talent, set expectations, motivate, and develop. So it grounds me in that is what I need to do on a day-to-day basis in my job at Ameriprise. Having a routine, being disciplined about the things that impact me in a very positive way from a health standpoint, from a mind standpoint, those routine components are very important. And then also just walking away from time to time, walking away from the book or walking away from the work that is never ending and being present, focused on, in particular, in this example, my family. And I think about my kids. My daughter, Hannah, is 12 years old at this point. My son, Jack, is 8. He'll be 9 coming up later this month. And that time goes by in a blink of an eye. And you've described this to me, Brian. I only have so much time with my kids at home. And granted, I'm hopeful that we have long lives and have many, many moments of happiness beyond childhood, but that childhood is a precious time. And when my son says, "Hey, do you want to play?" my answer should be, yes, absolutely, I want to play, because that's what I should be doing right now, not whatever the other thing is that I just keep focusing on.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I always say that, when you're raising children, every day is incredibly long, but the years go by so fast. And that's really what parenting is. What's interesting? You mentioned routine. And one of the things I've learned in the last 3 years is, and we talked about this a little bit prior to the recording today, is, I've been a father since I was 19 years old. So I've been a father
Right.
for a long time, 37 years to be exact. It'll be 38 years next, 37 years now. And I found that it was when the kids are grown, and of course they still need me. My son is finishing up his junior year in college. My daughter has an amazing husband and my pride of my joy, pride of my life, Jack, my grandson, who'll be 3 here in July. They still need me, but they need me in such a different way. Like, they don't need me on the day to day. They need me on the fringe and then pull in when needed type thing. And when you're used to being needed on a day to day basis for so many years, you can lose your purpose relatively fast. That familial purpose anyway. And one of the things, and I found myself over the last 3 years, and I've talked about this openly. I've gone through some dark times, being an empty nester. But what's helped me is something you said here earlier, is having a routine. Having that 5 o'clock alarm go off, get up, do the same thing every day for 2 hours, because that becomes kind of what that routine needs me as much as I need the routine. And so that helps me to continue on with my purpose. In the book, Make Your Bed, that's one thing I've learned. I make my bed every morning. I high five the mirror and I listen to birds outside. 3 things I do every morning within the first 10 minutes of getting out of bed. And then obviously, like, the reading, the journaling, the gratitude, the prayer, the meditation, whatever, exercise, all the things. What I find when I'm traveling and I'm gone a lot, is I get out of my routine, Jason, and man, that throws me off. I don't go a little off my routine. It's like if I don't have that full routine, or at least 3/4 of it, I'm way off. And so as I travel next time in a couple of weeks, I have to find a way to say, okay, I can't do all, say, 8 things I do every morning, but I have to do these 5 every morning, because I have to have that grounding, because for so long, my children were my grounding, in being a dad of a child who needs you every day. So yeah, cherish it. You and Heather cherish those, Jack and Hannah, right?
Yes, that's right.
Cherish them, man, because I know you still have many, many years before they leave, but it will go by quickly.
Yes, no doubt.
I think I know this answer, but the way you describe things, you can describe the same thing 3 different ways, and they all make so much sense. So, and I get learnings out of every time you describe something. So, for you, what would you say is your primary why in life? Whether it be values or principles, what really is it that drives Jason the way that you are so driven?
Yeah, it's family, health, wealth, meaningful work, and faith. And each one of those, I could go on for hours and hours speaking about them. But as you described, pretty much everything I've said up to this point connects back to those 5 values. And it is one thing to go through the process of the values card sort, and certainly giving Think to Perform credit for that. And so many of us have leveraged their approach to this. That is a step. Then as you come back to it on a somewhat regular basis to validate and see what changes have need to be made. And health is an example that wasn't in my top 5 until I had the health scare that I shared on the last episode. But once you have that clarity, then you can look at how you spend your time and think about, all right, is this aligned? So it's family, all right, health, yep, wealth, meaningful work, faith, and all of those components. I'm not running, at full speed at every single moment on all of those, but it's a grounding element, and it helps me determine, am I on the right track or not? Because these are the things that matter most to me.
I remember I wrote yours down last year, and actually, when I listened to the episode again a couple of weeks ago, I wrote those down because I compared them to mine, and we talked about this last year. Yours are family, meaningful work, health, wealth, and faith. Mine are family, mind, body, spirit, and impact. So 4 of ours, I just have different names for them. When I did the limit cards a few years ago, I just put my own names because they resonated more for me, but they were the exact same. Right. So what we're talking about, folks, is from Linnick Aberman has Doug Linnick has a test or a process you can go through to determine your values. And I believe on their website, they still offer that for free. Do you know, Jason?
They do. It's still for free out there that people can access. Yeah.
So again, if I remember, I'll put on a direct website to Linnick Aberman. They're a consulting company, amazing people. We've had three or four from the firm on the podcast already in the last 2.5 years. And these Linux, I think they're still called Linux values cards or something like that. You can get on
Think to perform values cards. Absolutely.
Think to perform. Yeah. Think to perform. That's right. They're not Linux, Abram. They're Think to Perform now, aren't they? So I will include a website or a link to their website underneath Jason's book and underneath Mike's book on the bottom of today's show notes. So please click on those. All right. So I kind of like I said, I can look at this and I could look at last year's notes and this year's notes, and I think I get a really good picture of you. But what is your mantra for living life? Do you have a mantra you live by?
I don't know that there's one mantra alone, but there's a few that I was thinking about that I think would resonate with the audience and are not just because they resonate with the audience, are actually something that I try to live by. So my day job is learning, and I believe it's my calling as well. And this idea of practice and repetition, building behaviors of excellence is something I truly believe in. And putting in the work is necessary for you to build those behaviors of excellence. And you have moments where you're thinking, this is really hard, and do I actually like to do this? And I had shared in my learning blog this week that the neighbor girl, she stopped by and asked me 20 questions because my daughter wasn't outside, so she saw me landscaping. I was clearing some old mulch out, and she asked me 20 questions. The last question she asked me, she said, "Do you like landscaping?" And I had a moment, a pause moment, where my back was a little bit sore and I was tired and I was dirty, and I thought, I don't know, do I really like landscaping? Well, I like the outcome of it. And then sometimes learning is hard and you're uncomfortable. And, ultimately, I don't know if I like the process, but I like the outcome. Now, I didn't really think for that long. I just immediately asked her the question, I don't know, does your dad like landscaping? And her response, and of course, kids say the darndest things, no, he just likes to sit around and do nothing, was her response. And I saw him out there working on the yard previously, so maybe he was taking a rest, and of course, she didn't give him a break whatsoever. But that practice and repetition build behaviors of excellence. And I'm not a professional landscaper like my good friend Tim, but that idea of that hard work drives to those intended outcomes. And that comes back to discipline and routine and some of those components as well.
That's interesting. And I started listening to one of Jocko's podcasts, and it was about leaning into it. I haven't gotten far. I had Huberman on there as this guest, and they were just getting into it. And one of the things that I learned a long time ago, Jason, and I've been blessed enough to implement it, not always, but is when you look at the toughest thing about your life, the toughest thing about your job, the toughest thing about whatever it is you're doing, when you look at the difference between nourishing people who are achievers versus toxic people who tear things down, the toxic people look at the worst parts of their job and they feel that that part of their job brings out the very worst in them. Where a nourishing achiever might say, I hate this part of my job. I can't stand it. It challenges me. I don't like it. I'm sore. I'm mentally compromised or mentally drained. But I know by doing it, it brings out the best in me. And that's the whole idea of leaning into those things that are hard. It's not easy getting up in the morning to work out, as you know, or to put the effort you put into your career, or to write a book in a relatively short period of time. But leaning into things, it's amazing how I love Mel Robbins and some of her stuff. She's got the 5-second rule. And she says, your brain has 5 seconds to make a decision. And if you think about something, if you're going to go out there and rake the lawn or go for a run or start journaling or whatever it is, and you wait more than 5 seconds, you will not do it. You say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and you just do it. You don't think any more than 5 seconds. That has helped me so much, especially getting out of bed in the morning. Don't push, no snooze buttons pushed anymore, or at least very seldom. I think that's it, man. Just leaning into it, that discipline and routine. I asked you this question last year, and I believe I did, and I'll ask it again because I love this question. And if that is, you and I are going to go, if I come over over in Minnesota, and you and I take off, and we get on a time machine. We fly back to some younger version of Jason Grom, 20 years old, 15, 25, whatever you want. And you sat down with your younger self. And I'm just going to sit and observe and take some notes. What do you say to your younger self? What advice? What words of wisdom?
Yeah, there's three things that come to mind. First, and I alluded to this a little bit before, but it's worth repeating, is this is not your last achievement. So when I accomplish something, and when I say I, a lot of times it is we, it is part of family or team. This is not your last achievement. This is not your last accomplishment. That is something that I would tell myself, to know that you will continue to have the opportunity to grow and develop and accomplish great things. The second thing, and this is something that I'm so thankful that my daughter and my son's getting there as well, but in particular, my daughter reads a ton. We were in Barnes & Noble this weekend, and she bought 4 books that were 300, 400-page books, and she was so excited about it. Every day she comes to me and says, Daddy, I read 5 chapters today, and I only have this many left. And it's not about I got to read more books because I have to read a certain number, but she just loves reading. And I would have told myself, Jason, you should read more. And I know anybody that knows me now, they're like, holy cow, Jason, you read all the time. But it wasn't always that case. And you mentioned Huberman. Andrew Huberman had an episode a few years ago where he talked about how when you read, you are improving your speech by reading. And when you think about that, you're thinking, well, I'm reading, I'm not actually speaking, but your mind is actually speaking those words, and you improve as a speaker. And I think about the benefits of my speaking and how I could have accelerated much faster if I would have read more back in the day. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is tying back to the book. When my grandfather passed away, I was obviously sad, and I felt like there were so many things that he wasn't going to be able to experience in my life. Number one was actually seeing our wedding, Heather and my wedding. So he died only a number of months before our wedding, and we had already been engaged at that point in time. And of course, he never met my Jack and Hannah. So I'm certainly sad about that, but the time machine lesson would be, he will be with me forever. I wear my wedding ring is a combo of his ring and the ring that my wife Heather had made for our wedding. But it's not about a physical thing as much as spiritually and maybe nudging from the other side, coming back to Mary's book, he will always be with me. And that mantra that you alluded to before, that idea of I'm okay now because you're here, is what he used to say to people. And I could say the same thing about him, even though he's not physically here. He is still here with me.
I love that. I'm just trying to write this down. I'm just fascinated by this process of this book. I want to go back to it for just a minute, a little bit.
Yeah.
When you look at, obviously this is the second time you've gone, you had the notes, you had the diary, I'm sorry, then you guys put it into digital form. What did you learn more about your grandfather in this last achievement of getting this book published? Yeah,
well, one kind of funny story. I knew my grandpa would teach me self-defense and the like, and he'd give me an arm grapple and teach me those things. And I just thought he was just teaching me that from the standpoint of that's what a grandpa does. And he never was in any sort of fight or anything along those lines. Well, there's an excerpt in the book where it sounds like he pretty much knocked somebody out, and he seemed pretty pleased with what the outcome of that. So that was one example. He certainly stood up for himself there. Some other things that I learned, and I knew this to an extent, but it became clearer as I went through the diary and then also read these letters, is how impactful he was to the people that he was with during the war. And in particular, I'll highlight Kip, and that was his good friend who was actually 12 years older than him. So my grandfather was drafted when he was 21, so he was quite young, and Kip was was 12 years older. And I found a letter that Kip wrote to my grandfather the year before he died. So Kip died in 1982, I believe. So it was in 1981, Kip wrote this letter to my grandfather, and he indicated in the letter about how his wife was doing, and she had terminal cancer, and how things were hard. And he highlighted how he really wishes that my grandpa was there at that point. They lived far away from each other, because when they were in the war together, Kip's father passed away, and my grandfather was really there for him. Again, when his wife broke her back at one point, my grandpa was there for him. And he spotlighted how it would have been a lot easier if you were here with me, because you're that type of person. And I know how he made me feel, and I know how he made my parents and aunts and uncles and cousins feel. But hearing about that relationship with the soldier, and then I even made connection with another soldier's daughter. His name was Spash Esposito, and he apparently was somebody that Spash Esposito, Carmelo's his actual name, that my grandpa was somebody he talked about all the time, his buddy Jack. And I should have known this, but it just became so much clearer when I actually went into the details of the book, including all these letters and other things that I was reviewing.
You know, I think as you talk about your grandpa, and I'm looking at pictures you've had on Facebook here. I'm scrolling as we're talking, and I'm looking. You can see him as a young man in the war, and just reading the excerpts from the book and the reviews. The one thing that makes me think of is your grandpa clearly inspired a lot of people. I mean, Kip, and the people you've mentioned, your family. Do you ever wonder if you're living up to that legacy? Because I wonder if I'm that guy that when I'm gone, or when I'm not near someone who I'm close with, I'm across the country and they need me, if they're thinking, I wish Brian was here, or I wish Brian was still with us today. I could use him today. Because that's really what you want to do. You want to leave a legacy. Live, love, learn, and leave a legacy. I think that was Stephen Covey's mantra, something like that. And that one really I've never thought of in a deep level. I think about it, but not like that. I think a lot about it more as my family, my core family, and what I do for for a living. I don't often think about that when it comes to friends or colleagues or people from my past. I think of it really as my kids and my mother and nieces and nephews. And then I think about it for clients and, podcast viewers or listeners and things like that, but not really like as far as like friend group, people I've, had colleagues in company or played rugby with in college, or even my friends now who I love dearly. They're like family to me, but that really expands my thoughts of, am I doing that for other people outside of the people I've been thinking of over the past 2 decades? Because I don't know that I could say the answer. I don't know if I could say, yes, I'm leaving the legacy that I'd like to, which feels good to be challenged.
Absolutely. And it's something I absolutely think about, in particular from the context of how I've shared this in the past, that he was the center of attention by making everyone else the center of attention. And I have plenty of moments where I'm like, geez, I'm talking too much. This isn't about me. Why should I do that? Like my grandpa, Jack Anderson, would not do this. He would be more focused on others, asking them about what's important to them. And it is definitely something that I think about and I aspire to be. And I have moments where I certainly feel really good about the impact that I'm making and the legacy that I'm making, but I also don't want to get a big head and think that, I am truly doing this, when I think to some of the things that he did and how he operated, and it wasn't about him, it was about everyone else. And obviously you need to take care of yourself first and foremost. And I think he did, but he ultimately is a model for how I would like to operate in most circumstances. In most every circumstance, if you think about what he did, it's a pretty good way of responding. He was a human being, of course, just like anybody else, and I don't want to put him into some sort of godlike sort of view, but just somebody that I absolutely looked up to and continue to think about how I can be more like him.
Well, the 2 things you said that I got out of that, you're conscious of the fact that you don't want to get that big head. And you do
Right.
your best to stay humble. And I don't know, I forgot the word you use. You're very cognizant of it anyway. And you do everything you can to stay humble. I don't think most people
Right.
do that. I don't think most people are even conscious of that. I think when I talk, I think we're both very blessed friends and colleagues that you have and I have, that we hang with a pretty good group of people overall. But I don't think the majority of humans think that way. I think they don't think they think about it. I think they would rather become famous. They would rather become more noticed than really looking at the impact they're making on people. If you want to be interesting, be interested. I think most people want to be interested by just being interesting and being the loudest person in the room. And I know I fight that at times too, Jason. I fight that sometimes. I've 4 or 5 times in the past 2 years, I've had to sit myself down and really question through some journaling of why am I doing this podcast? Am I doing it because it's growing and it feels good because people send me nice letters and emails and texts and cards in the mail and the accolades, or am I doing it because I really want to make a difference in the world? And I know that that's human nature to go that way a little bit, but I have realized, no, it is really because I realize now why I didn't name it the Brian Bosley Podcast. I realize that now because I didn't want that. And that's why I've never named my company. I've had my practice has changed names 3 times. Same business, 3 names. I've never been Brian Bosley Consulting. And that was a conscious choice when I was 29 years old. When I started this, is I wanted to be bigger than me, but still, it's one of those things that it's a little tempting at times to go down that rabbit hole of seeking a little more, not fame, that'd be as too stretch of a word, but at least more acknowledgement, more appreciation. When in reality, that's not really what you're about. And that's really not what I'm about either. It feels good. It really does. But it's not the long game. It's the short game. And I don't think that's the one to play.
Yeah. And it's not a bad thing to feel good when somebody reaches out and said that what you did impacted them. That feels good, and that should be perfectly okay. And then you just need to ground yourself from time to time and remind yourself back to your values. And then ultimately you look at why you're doing what you're doing and what success looks like. And then as long as you're conscious of it, like you described, as a human being, we make mistakes. The other mantra I didn't share that was, of course, from the great Yoda, failure, the best teacher it is. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to stumble, and that's okay. We know that we can then have an opportunity to make it right as we move forward.
I agree. And I really love today. Every day starts at 0. That really resonated with me today so far. So I appreciate that one because I think that's something I need to hear right now. And it's funny because so many of the shows that I do, there's one thing that resonates me in each show. And so I feel like I'm doing this show for very selfish reasons. I'm learning so much from people like you. Now, I don't learn a lot from every episode, but with the last 2 you've given, that shows you've done with me, I have written so many notes and circled so many things. And that one was today's biggest one for me. Question.
I'm humbled that was helpful to you. And it certainly wasn't the one that I thought out of the gates that, all right, I need to find this nugget for Brian, but I'm so glad that was an outcome that we had from this discussion.
Well, it definitely was. And it's interesting because usually when I have somebody on the second time, you get a lot of learnings the first time because you're getting to know that person and you don't know what they're going to share. They're sharing life stories that I have no knowledge about, very little anyway. And the second one, you don't get as much. I don't because I've learned a lot in the first one. I do. This one, it was like I got pretty much as much out of the second one from you as I've gotten from the first one. But I think that's also a product of what you do for a living as well. You're constantly coaching and training, and you're in charge of coaching and training at Ameriprise. That does sit well. You have these nuggets that you use, you coach, you teach your children, you utilize them yourself. So, they're more on the surface for you because they're so part of your existence. So What's next for you, Jason?
Yeah, so coming up later on this month, I'm excited to get back into my hometown of Marinette, Wisconsin and Menominee, Michigan for an event at the Logging Museum. So The Logging Museum also is a museum of history from the Marinette Menominee area. And I'll be doing a talk and a book signing there as part of their open house, promoting the book, but also speaking about my experience and sharing a bit more about my grandfather. That all came to light through the book, of course, and some of the promotion I was doing online. And I made a connection with Joan, who's in charge of the Historical Society there. There was a newspaper article today, so there's been a lot of fun activities tied to that, and I'm excited to continue to promote the book. On the work front, I'm always reading some new book and exploring new topics, and your last episode reinforced for me the need for me to finally read Extreme Ownership from Jocko and team. And I'm looking at some ways that we can incorporate some of that into how we operate at work. And of course, there'll be more after that for that matter as well. And then learning the flow of life continues to be my mantra overall. And I continue to write my weekly blog. And really the whole intent of that is a bit selfish, back to your point on the podcast. It's reinforcing for me. My day job is focused on learning. So I need to be able to find learning in the flow of life. Of course, work is a part of it. But if I have the ability to rapidly learn and reflect on what I've learned and apply that quickly, I am in such a better position to help others do that as well. So it's something that I certainly will continue to do, and it helps me in my day job, but it also helps me in life in general.
When are you going to be in Menominee Marinette?
May 19th. May 19th.
It's a Sunday.
18th and the 19th. So I'll get there. Unfortunately, things didn't work out great from a scheduling standpoint where we would normally come for an entire weekend, but I'll just be there for that one night. I'll be back for Memorial Day weekend with the family then as well. So 2 weekends in a row of making that long trek.
Well, is it an open event?
It is, absolutely.
Because I'm speaking in Marquette, Michigan on the morning of the 18th.
Okay.
I think 9:30 to 10:30. And then and that weekend, my son and my daughter are all gone. So I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? And I have to stay in town because I have to stay in the area, but I can't travel because I have a doctor's appointment, I think, on the 21st or 20th. And I'm actually helping out with my grandson, the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, helping him to get to daycare. Yeah. So I'm going to put that in my calendar and see if I can shoot there. What time are you speaking on the 18th?
2:00. So the open house is from 12 to 2, and then 2:00 Central Time is the actual speech and signing then.
So I can get a signed book if I show up. I can buy a book and get a sign. All right. Well, that's good. That might work out well for me because I know I'm in town that weekend. So
cool.
All right. My final question, my friend, is, we've asked a lot over the past 2 episodes, but is there any question that I didn't ask that you wish I would have, or any final message you want to leave with the Bamboo Pack audience?
I'll turn it around to a question for you to start. Have you ever had somebody sing on one of your episodes?
No.
All right. So if you're okay with this, I'm going to make this a first. Now, I'm not going to sing an entire song, but my grandfather, the book is called A Soldier's Song, and singing was a big part of his life. Music was a big part of his life. The fact that I played in the University of Wisconsin marching band, the tuba, was all based upon my grandpa and my connection to him. So I'm just going to sing a very quick snippet. I'm not going to sing as well as he did because he was amazing, but I'm going to sing the song, Let Me Call You Sweetheart. So I'm just going to try it, and hopefully it comes out well. So, let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. Let me hear you whisper that you love me too. I'm going to stop there. Wow. Hopefully that was okay.
Dude, well, here's a funny thing, audience. Before we started recording, we were trying to figure out how we could play an actual recording of Jason's grandfather singing, and we couldn't figure it out. We couldn't get the audio just right. That might have been even better, to have his grandson sing that song. Dude, that was pretty cool.
I'm glad you liked it.
The hair on my arms were. I am a little cold because I keep my temperature. Way down. I'm only wearing a t-shirt, but the hair on my arms were raised up when you were singing.
Excellent. And as my grandpa used to say, if you don't like that, you don't like home cooking.
You have a nice voice, actually.
Thank you.
You do. You have a nice voice. And it's hard to do that on a podcast without music in the background. We don't have Joe Rogan's studio here where we can edit things real well. That turned out really nice.
Right. Excellent.
Brother, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm so glad we've become friends over the past couple of years. And, just getting to know you more and more and more like this, it's like, why weren't we friends 10, 15 years ago?
No doubt.
I mean, we knew of each other, and we were friends on social media. And of course, we played in the same circles in the corporate world, but we never really never connected. I feel very blessed. I really do.
As well. I'm so glad that we connected.
I am too. All right. Well, Jason, can you stay on a few minutes after we're done recording?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So I'll do the final salutation. Jason Grom, my friend, I just want to thank you again for being such an honored and inspiring guest, and for honoring your family and your grandpa's legacy like you have. And just thank you for coming on the show twice. And I can't wait to read the book. It's in my cart now. I'll order it when we're done here, when I can push the right buttons. But everybody get out there and please look at the book. Check it out, Amazon. It's 5-star rating. Read the reviews. I think it's going to be something well worth everybody's time to look back into the history of a man who served our country, but from a perspective of such a kind-hearted person. And, let us understand what war was really like for these young soldiers back then. So, Jason, thank you for being such an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in once again for episode 121. We'll be back next week for episode 122 with another guest, another author, I should say. Please get out there and strive to give and be your best right now. The world needs your best. Please show love and respect to others, but also look at yourself and give that love and respect to yourself. Do what Jason said. Get up tomorrow morning and say, today I start at 0. And do that every day and give it your best. And then live with purpose, live intentionally, live consciously. Please smash that like button. Please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening to this. And please share this episode with 3 people. And please know I love and appreciate all of you out there listening in the Bamboo Pack audience.